Your presence at the Hartwell Gala would frankly embarrass this firm. My manager said it quietly, leaning back in his chair as though commenting on the weather outside our 32nd floor window overlooking Bay Street. These are high-net-worth clients, Maya. We need people who understand that world. No offense, but you just don't fit the room. I stood in his doorway with my notebook pressed against my chest and a smile I had perfected over 3 years of this exact kind of conversation. Through the glass partition behind him, I could see 2 colleagues very deliberately not looking at me, their eyes fixed on their monitors with the particular intensity of people who are listening to every word. I see, I said. Is there anything specific I should focus on while you're at the event? He had the decency to look briefly uncomfortable before his expression settled back into its usual arrangement of mild authority. The Caldwell Media Kit needs another pass. And I'd like preliminary concepts for the November campaign on my desk by Friday. He turned back to his screen. That'll be all. I walked back to my desk the long way around, past the kitchen, so I wouldn't have to pass those 2 glass offices again. I filled a mug with coffee I didn't want and stood at the window for a moment, watching a streetcar inch its way along King Street below. The Hartwell Foundation Gala. In 4 days, my firm's senior team would dress in their finest and spend an evening at the Fairmont Royal York in front of the very people my family had spent 30 years building relationships with in this city. And I would be here, alone in the office, writing copy for a campaign that my manager would present as entirely his own. I had known about the gala for 6 weeks. I had also known, for 6 weeks, that I would not be on the attendee list. My manager, whose name was Derek Foss and who had joined our firm 8 months ago from a boutique agency in Calgary, had been subtly redirecting my work since his first week. He had a way of reassigning my better projects to colleagues he described as more client-ready, while keeping me occupied with the foundational work those colleagues would later present. He was careful. Nothing was ever said that could be quoted in an HR complaint. Just a slow, steady erosion of credit, combined with the occasional comment about polish, or presence, or fitting the room. I sat at my desk and opened the Caldwell file. Then I closed it again and pulled out my personal phone. I typed a message to my mother. Can we talk tonight? I have an idea about the gala. Her reply came within 30 seconds. I'm at the cottage but calling you at 7. Everything okay? I typed back. Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. That wasn't quite true yet. But by 7 o'clock, sitting cross-legged on my kitchen floor in my Leslieville apartment with a glass of Riesling from my parents' Niagara property on the counter beside me, it began to be. My mother listened without interrupting, which was not her natural state. When I finished she was quiet for a moment and I heard the familiar sound of the lake behind her, the sound I had fallen asleep to every August of my childhood. I could simply call Gerald, she said. Gerald Hartwell was her oldest friend and the foundation's board chair. They had gone to Queens together. One call and this Derek situation resolves itself rather completely. No. I said it more firmly than I meant to. I'm sorry, I don't mean I need this to happen without your interference. If you call Gerald, everything I've built at this firm becomes a question mark. Did she earn it or did her mother fix it? I can't spend the rest of my career answering that. Another pause. The lake. What do you need from me? Then. I need a table at the gala. Under my name, not yours, not Dad's, not the foundation's. Just mine. You're already on the foundation's permanent guest list, sweetheart. You've been on it since you were 7. I know. But Derek doesn't know that. I took a sip of wine. I need you to let this play out naturally. I need Gerald and the team to receive me the way they normally would. No special instructions, no heads up about what's happening. Just let me walk in and let it be what it is. My mother made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sigh. You are very much your father's daughter. Is that a yes? That is a yes. But Maya, her voice shifted slightly, if at any point this man makes things worse for you, professionally, because of the gala, you call me. Promise me that. I promised. After we hung up I finished the wine, opened my laptop, and spent 2 hours building a file. Every project where my contribution had been absorbed into someone else's presentation. Every redirect, every quiet reassignment, every comment about my readiness and my fit. Dates, names, email threads, meeting notes. I was not planning to use it. I simply felt better having it. The next 4 days were ordinary. I wrote the Caldwell Media Kit. I drafted the November concepts. I attended the Tuesday morning team meeting where Derek walked through the Gala logistics, and I watched 3 colleagues write notes with the focused enthusiasm of people who had already picked out their outfits. No one looked at me sideways. No one said anything awkward. I had become, in the social ecology of our office, simply someone who was not going. The fact of my exclusion had been absorbed into the furniture. On Thursday evening I went home early, which I was permitted to do because the team had an afternoon pre-event briefing I had not been invited to. I showered. I stood in front of my closet for a long time and then reached past the work blazers and the weekend jeans and took out the dress my mother had sent me at Christmas. Midnight blue silk, deceptively simple, with a neckline that suggested it understood exactly what room it was walking into. I had worn it once, at New Year's, and had felt slightly overdressed for the party I'd attended. I did not feel overdressed now. I took a cab to Front Street. The Royal York's facade was lit against the November dark, and even from the sidewalk I could hear the particular hum of a large room full of people who were accustomed to large rooms. I gave my name at the registration desk and the young woman there checked her list, then looked up at me with a different quality of attention. "Miss Tremblay Owens," she said. "Of course. We have you at the founders' table this evening. Can I have someone escort you in?" "I know the way," I said. "Thank you." The main ballroom had been transformed in the way only the Hartwell Foundation managed, everything warm, gold and deep green. The tables set with the quiet extravagance that doesn't announce itself. I stood at the entrance for a moment and took a breath. I saw my firm's table before I saw anyone from my firm. It was a good table, well-positioned, mid-room. Derek was already there, standing beside his chair with a glass of champagne, talking to our director of client services. He was wearing a suit I recognized as new, and he had the slightly elevated energy of someone who had been looking forward to this evening for weeks. He did not see me immediately. I moved through the room toward the far end where the founders' tables were arranged in a gentle curve, and I was halfway there when Gerald Hartwell appeared from my left. Gerald was 71 and had the bearing of a man who had spent decades being the most important person in every room he entered without ever needing to mention it. He saw me, stopped mid-sentence with the woman beside him, and opened his arms. "Maya." He said my name the way people say the name of someone they are genuinely glad to see. "I didn't know you were coming tonight." "Your mother didn't say a word." "She didn't know until earlier this week," I said, and let him fold me into a brief hug. "She sends her love. She's at the cottage, still chasing that peace and quiet." He shook his head fondly and turned to the woman beside him. "Diane, do you know Maya Tremblay Owens? Catherine's daughter." "Maya has been in the city. How long has it been now?" 3 years, I said. 3 years. Working in communications, if I remember correctly." He looked at me with a question in his expression. "Broadfield and Associates," I said. Something moved across his face. "Oh, that's I believe we know some people there. They're doing the Hartwell Communications work this cycle, aren't they?" "Derek something." "Derek Foss," I said pleasantly. "He's my manager." Gerald looked at me for a moment. He was not a slow man. "Is he here this evening?" "I believe so, yes. I saw him when I came in." Gerald's expression did not change, exactly. But there was a settling in it, a rearrangement of something. "Well," he said, "we'll have to make sure to say hello to the whole team later. Come, your seat is next to the Abercrombies tonight, and Patricia has been asking about your mother for months." I spent the first hour of the evening at the founders' table, which was, as it had always been, a particular kind of easy. These were people who had known me since I was a child, carried into rooms just like this one on my mother's hip. Patricia Abercrombie asked about the Niagara property and whether Dad had finally sorted out the drainage issue on the East Vineyard. The man to my left, whose family had co-founded the hospital wing the Gala was raising money for, remembered the summer I was 16, and had done a volunteer placement at the hospital's pediatric ward. The conversation was warm and wide-ranging and required nothing from me except to be exactly who I was. It was during the pre-dinner remarks that I first became aware of my firm's table watching me. I noticed it peripherally at first, a stillness in that part of the room, a redirected attention. I did not look directly at them. Gerald was at the podium acknowledging the foundation's major supporters, reading from a prepared list, and when he reached the Tremblay Owens Family Endowment, which funded the foundation's annual research grants and had done so for 26 years, there was a brief and very specific silence from the directions of my firm's table that I could feel without seeing. I kept my eyes on Gerald. After the remarks, during the movement and noise of people finding seats and waitstaff beginning their circuits with the first course, I excused myself from the founder's table and went to the bar. I ordered sparkling water because I wanted to be entirely clear-headed for the next part of the evening. And I was standing there when I heard Derek's voice behind me. Maya. I turned. He was holding his champagne glass with both hands, which was not something he normally did, and his expression had the particular quality of a man who is recalculating something in real time. I didn't know you were. How did you? He stopped, started again. I didn't realize you had a connection to the foundation. It didn't seem relevant to my work, I said. I kept my voice exactly as pleasant as it always was with him. My family has been involved with Hartwell for a long time. My mother and Gerald went to university together. He was quiet for a moment. Around us, people moved and talked and the band was beginning to tune somewhere across the room. The endowment, he said. Yes. That's your family. Yes. He looked at his champagne. Then he looked back at me and I could see the realization forming, not just the social recalibration but the larger shape of it. The 3 years of comments and redirects, and this isn't quite the right fit for you assembling themselves into a different picture. Maya, I want you to know that my decision about the gala was purely about Derek. I said his name quietly and without hostility. Patricia Abercrombie is walking toward us and she chairs the Foundation's Communications Committee. She's going to want to talk shop. I'd suggest being on your best form. He turned. Patricia Abercrombie was indeed moving through the crowd in our direction, with the purposeful energy of a woman who had something specific to say. What followed was not something I had scripted or planned in detail. It unfolded, as the best things do, naturally. Patricia had been on the committee that had reviewed and approved the current communications contract. And she had questions, sharp, specific questions about deliverables and timelines, and the campaign direction for the Foundation's spring push. She addressed them, with great cordiality, to me. When Derek attempted to redirect her attention toward himself, she listened politely and then continued addressing me. Because Patricia Abercrombie had known me for 20 years and Derek Foss had been in the room for 40 minutes. 2 of my colleagues drifted over during this conversation. I watched them recalibrate in the way that people do when the social architecture of a situation suddenly reveals itself to be different from what they had assumed. Neither of them said anything. They just stood there and listened, and I could see the questions forming behind their eyes. After Patricia moved on, Derek stood beside me for a moment in what I can only describe as a reconfigured silence. I owe you an apology, he said finally. His voice was lower than normal. For the gala, and for he paused other things. I looked at him steadily. I think what you owe me is a serious conversation about the Apex campaign credit, the Morrison pitch, and the 3 concept briefs from Q2 that went to the client under other people's names. But that conversation can happen at the office, on Monday, with HR present if you prefer. I picked up my water. Tonight I'm going to enjoy the rest of the evening. I hope you do as well. I walked back toward the founder's table. I heard him say my name once more, quietly, behind me, but I kept moving. The dinner was excellent. The keynote speaker was a pediatric surgeon from the hospital who talked about a funding gap in early neurological research and managed to make a room full of wealthy Torontonians feel the specific, human weight of that gap in a way that opened wallets and also, briefly, eyes. I sat next to Gerald's wife Eleanor, who was 80 and sharp as a tack and had opinions about the current state of communications in the charitable sector that were both pointed and correct. We talked for nearly an hour. It was the best conversation I'd had in months. After dessert, during the silent auction period when people circulated and the noise level rose pleasantly, Gerald found me near the display of auction items and drew me slightly aside. I had a word with your manager earlier, he said. Gerald. I kept my voice gentle. I asked my mother not to. Your mother said nothing. I approached him myself. He held up a hand. I didn't threaten anything. I didn't make any calls. I simply introduced myself properly and made it clear that your family's relationship with this foundation is personal as well as financial, and that I think very highly of you. He paused. I also mentioned, in passing, that we'd be reviewing our communications contract at the end of Q1. I looked at him. That's also true, he said mildly. It just seemed relevant to share tonight. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out slightly more freely than I intended, and Eleanor, passing nearby, turned to look at me with an approving expression. "You are exactly like your mother," Gerald said, with great affection. "Come for dinner soon. She's been monopolizing you at that cottage long enough." I took a cab home at 11:30. The city moved past the windows in its usual nighttime arrangement, and I sat in the back seat and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. The following Monday I came into the office 20 minutes early. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and composed a meeting request to Derek, copying our HR director, with the subject line: Account Contribution Review Q2 and Q3. I attached the file I had built over the previous weeks. Dates, records, email threads. The whole careful architecture of what had been taken and what I was owed. Derek arrived at 7:45. He saw me at my desk, then saw his inbox, then went into his office and closed the door, which he rarely did. I drank my coffee and opened the November campaign file and began to work. The HR meeting happened that Wednesday. It was not dramatic. There was no raised voice, no confrontation in the hallway. It was a 2-hour conversation in a glass boardroom with our HR director and the firm's managing partner, during which I presented my documentation and Derek was, for the first time in the 18 months I had known him, very quiet. The managing partner, whose name was Sandra Lim and who had built this firm from 12 people to 90 over 15 years, looked at my documentation for a long time without speaking. "This is thorough," she said. "I want it to be accurate," I said. Sandra looked at Derek. "I think we need a follow-up conversation," she said, in a tone that made the word follow-up do a significant amount of work. 3 weeks later, Derek Foss was moved to a regional client services role in Ottawa, a transfer that was announced internally with the usual language about strategic realignment. He was not fired. I had not asked for him to be fired. I had asked for my contributions to be formally acknowledged, for the Q2 accounts to be accurately credited, and for a structural change to the reporting relationship. Sandra had agreed to all three. The conversation I did not expect happened on a Thursday afternoon in late November. Sandra appeared at my desk with 2 coffees, set one beside my keyboard, and sat down in the chair across from me. "I want to talk about your role here going forward," she said. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. "All right. I've been going back through the project records from the past year." She looked at me levelly. "Not because of what happened with Derek. I mean, yes, partly because of that. But also because the Hartwell file is expanding and they've specifically requested that you manage their account. Gerald Hartwell called me personally." I kept my expression neutral. I made a note to call Gerald that evening and tell him he had overstepped, with great warmth. "Patricia Abercrombie also sent an email," Sandra continued. She seemed to be suppressing something. It was 3 paragraphs long and used the phrase, "extraordinary communication instincts" twice. "Patricia is generous," I said. "Maya." Sandra looked at me directly. "I'm going to be honest with you. I should have been paying closer attention to what was happening on this team. That's on me, not just on Derek. What I can do now is make it right in the way that's actually meaningful." She paused. "I want to discuss moving you into a senior account director role, the Hartwell account, the Pemberton Group, and oversight of 2 junior members of the team. It comes with a compensation adjustment. I'll send the numbers this afternoon." I thought about the 3 years I had spent being adequate. The sensible blazers and the practical choices and the decision, made at 29 when I had joined this firm, to build something without the scaffolding my family's name could have provided. I thought about what it had cost, and what it had taught me, and whether the 2 things balanced out. I thought they did. Just barely. But they did. "I'd like to see the numbers," I said. "And I want it to be clear internally that this role reflects my work record and the client relationships I've built. Not my family's foundation involvement." "Understood," Sandra said. For what it's worth, she hesitated. "The documentation you put together for HR. The detail and precision of it. That alone tells me you're exactly who I want running major accounts." I thanked her. She left. I turned back to my screen. Outside, November was doing its usual thing to Toronto, the wind off the lake moving through the intersection below in cold, decisive gusts. The last of the leaves finishing their long argument with the trees. I watched a streetcar pull away from the stop below, its windows lit orange against the gray afternoon. I thought about calling my mother. I thought about the story I would tell her, and the fact that the best part of it was that it was entirely mine. The 3 years, the work, the file I had built in the small hours of a Tuesday night, the choice to walk into that gala as myself rather than as her daughter, and to let the room discover, at its own pace, that those were the same person. I would call her tonight. She would say I told you so in the particular way that meant she was proud. She would ask about the November numbers at the vineyard and tell me the cottage drainage was finally resolved and mention, with studied casualness, that Gerald was having a dinner in December. I would say yes. I was ready to be in those rooms as myself, now not hiding from them and not hiding behind them. Just myself, which turned out to have been enough all along. I opened the Hartwell file and got to work.